All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully some more people will join us throughout the session. Welcome everyone to today's Be Well Lunch and Learn titled Stress Management for High Burnout Professions. These lunch and learns are brought to you by Penn State Health Human Resources Be Well Initiative, which is an initiative to help improve employee wellness across the system. As always, we do record these sessions, so if you would like to revisit them at all, you can find them on the Be Well website. Along with the recording can be found in the follow-up email that you should receive in the next few days. This is very interactive, so if we go along today, if you have any questions or comments, please utilize the Q&A and chat box features, and we will try to get to everyone's questions and comments as best as we can throughout the session. And with that, I would like to welcome our speaker, Michelle Zellner, health and happiness strategist, author, and speaker. Through a combination of personal coaching, corporate training, and public speaking, Michelle has personally informed, influenced, and inspired thousands on their journey to become better beings. Drawing on her 25 plus years in the industry and advanced degrees in wellness-related education, she recently released her book, The You Revolution, The Journey of a Better Being, sharing proven practical strategies for true lifestyle change with an even wider audience. Her latest project, the PFF is Your BFF Handbook, a simple guide to fueling your busy body, is ideal for anyone struggling to make healthy eating a lifestyle habit. The seeds for Michelle's wellness career were planted at age 7 when she excelled as a competitive gymnast. Her childhood experiences led her to the University of Hawaii, where she studied psychology and nutrition, followed by a master's in kinesiology from CU Boulder and a personal trainer certification. Today, Michelle continues to learn and lead in all areas of fitness, nutrition, mind-body practices, and overall well-being, cultivating her passion for connecting with people and facilitating lasting lifestyle change. And with that, I welcome Michelle. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We have a lot to dive into, and as Angela said, this is a very interactive training. So I hope you have something to write with and on, because there is going to be time where I just be quiet and you get to get the opportunity to get some thoughts out of your head. I always encourage people to share things in the chat box. If you want to keep it private, just send it to me, Michelle Zellner, your co-host, and I will share the content without sharing who it is that is giving me that information. A little bit of disclaimer here, as you just heard my very lengthy bio. I am not a doctor. I am somebody who has lived life and 25 years of my own business and working with lots and lots and lots of people, of course, going my own journey as well, have just figured out what it takes to be a healthy, happy human. And the short answer is it's hard. It's hard because the environment, which is modern society, is not the one that the human specimen was designed for. And that means we have to do the best we can to mimic or recreate what that environment actually used to look like. And just generically speaking, I'm going to give you the very unsexy answer right here. It's called the healthy lifestyle. And yet healthy choices are hard choices. That is almost always the reality of it. But as we go through the content today, I hope that you're going to start to appreciate, if you haven't already, that it's hard now or harder later. And if you don't take care of your human, eventually everyone and everything is going to suffer. So before we dive too much farther into the content, I do like to get a little bit of a gauge of my audience. So scale of 1 to 10, speaking specifically about burnout, where do you think you are? 1 is, I don't even know what burnout means. 10 is, I'm there, I am burned out. Just based on today, physically, mentally, emotionally, how do you evaluate where you currently are in terms of your degree of burnout? 1, not at all. 10, I'm there. I like to kind of have a sense of what we're dealing with here. Also, if you would share, what things are you doing currently to nourish your human. So as I go through the rest of the training, maybe you can do this. Just imagine that you separate your unique named individual self from the human that you're in charge of. And just be kind of going through how you're treating it, what you're doing for it, what you're doing to it, to see if you are tending to it so that it can thrive. And then if we're doing some of those things, awesome, we should keep doing them. But if we're not doing them, or if we're actually doing things that are causing it harm, then clearly that's something we're going to want to address. Okay, so either my chat box is not working, or all 52 of you are very, very silent and quiet. One person, thank you very much. All right, we're getting some numbers in here. And this is not judgment in any way. This is for me to know where I am with my audience. And this is also for you to get a good sense of where you are. The closer you are to that 10, the more seriously you're going to want to take this. Now, I know many of you are actually healthcare professionals, so none of this is going to be shocking to you. None of this is probably going to be new, but sometimes we have to hear it from somebody else. Sometimes we have to take that step back and realize, okay, for all the things that I am at the root, at the foundation, I'm a human, and it doesn't really matter what else I am. I'm a human, which means these are some things that need to take place. So thank you for sharing. Have everything from a 4, got a bunch of 6s, a couple of 8s, we have a 9, we have a 10. Taking walks, beautiful, meditation, read, exercise, love all of that. We'll get into a lot of that here, working out, eating healthy, setting realistic expectations of myself. Beautiful. That's necessary for sure. Taking time to get outside, talking to friends. I love it. So I like for people to acknowledge the good things that you're already doing, because I think sometimes we dismiss that. And then we just focus on what we're not doing, or what we should be doing more of, or should be doing better. And that can be a separate conversation, but we should celebrate and be proud of the hard choices we're making, because they are hard. And we want to keep doing that. We want to strengthen the neurological pathways that make those things habits, and make us feel accomplished, so that we do have that motivation to keep on going. So thank you all for sharing that. All right, let us now get into some of the content here. So tell me and tell yourself, what are some of the things that resonate with you here on this list? Because, clearly there are certain, whether it's professional fields, or maybe your own personal life situation, it's also your own personal human that is going to either put you at a higher risk for burnout, or maybe keep you a little bit padded or buffered from it. A pre-existing high tolerance to stress, I think that's a really interesting statement. A high tolerance to stress. I know you all know that stress is toxic, right? Stress is the stress response, I should say. The stress response is complete chemical chaos in your body. So even if we have a high tolerance for it, it doesn't mean that it's not causing you harm. So I'm curious what that means. I think most people would think a high tolerance to stress actually means I've learned how to manage it in a healthy way, so that these things that maybe used to trigger me or trigger other people, they don't trigger me anymore. That's how I want you to look at a high tolerance for stress. You can take on triggers, but they're not triggers to you anymore, because you've taught yourself to override your natural ingrained fight or flight mechanism. Obviously, an exceptionally chaotic practice or life in general. Remember, you're the same human, whether you're at work, you're at the grocery store, you're sitting on your couch, you're riding in traffic, you're the same human. So whether it's chaos at work or it's chaos in your brain, chaos is chaos. So maybe we have chaos at work, and we have chaos at home, and we have chaos up in here. Clearly, that's going to put you at a very elevated risk. Maybe we have a misalignment with our values and our principles. So if you are spending your time, money, and energy in ways that are not aligned with your core guiding principles and your values, that is not going to work out well in the long run, right? Probably not even in the short term. So that is certainly something that could impact you. Perhaps you are the emotional buffer, right? You're the strong one. You're the person everybody comes to dump onto. And to some degree, that's probably why you do what you do, because you are that caretaker, you are that nurturer, you are that problem solver. But we can't always be all of that to everyone and still come out okay on the other side if we're not doing other things as well. Maybe we are spending lots of our time and energy, whether it's truly physical time and energy or it's mental time and energy, in our job. So do I have the ability to disconnect, or is my job taking me away from other aspects of my life? Lack of control over the work schedule and your free time, and then inability to care for yourself. And for whatever reason, I don't have the ability to do that. So what are some of these that resonate with you? Make a note, share with me if you'd like, because again, these are going to help you figure out what the plan is, right? So when we think about how to avoid burnout, well, it really depends on what is causing your burnout in the first place, because that's going to be a tailored plan. And there are always choices. Sometimes it's this really bad choice or this really bad choice, but there are always choices, right? Exceptionally chaotic practice. So that was, thank you for sharing that, Heather. Somebody shared that. And maybe there are things we can do about that. Maybe there aren't. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but that is going to be something that maybe we have to figure out how to put boundaries on, how to say no, how to manage our time, our schedule. Who knows? I don't know. You're going to have some time later to really think outside the box if you can, and start to outline an action plan for you. Oh, the go-to person for everybody. Yeah, that's a big one. Juggling 4 jobs. Wow. I'm not even sure how you do that. The emotional buffer, a few items on the list. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that can probably check a bunch of the boxes, right? The emotional buffer, that's an interesting one. So compassion fatigue is probably something that many of you are also at risk for, or if we are that emotional buffer and we start to feel compassion fatigue, that in itself will elevate your risk for burnout. So we want to have some things, that will protect us from compassion fatigue. Misalignment with some of the leadership, and then the family events, feeling guilty about others' needs and place of mind. Ooh, that's a good one. Guilt is such an interesting emotion, isn't it? I'm going to talk a little bit about all of this in just a greater detail in a moment, but let's just go over the stress response. And I know most of you know this, but I want to just lay it out there so you can get an idea of how I think about this. Your survival mechanism, right? The stress response, used in case of emergency only. So your survival mechanism, back in the day, we had very real threats to life. Animals wanted to eat us. Other people wanted our land. We had viruses and bacteria. We had the drought. We had the famine. We had wounds and injuries. If we didn't have the ability to fight, flee, or defend ourselves from the threat, we would have been wiped out as a species a very long time ago. So anytime the brain or the body perceives danger, it doesn't even have to be real danger. It's just interpreting it as a threat to your human. It is going to help you survive this threat, which means it will kick into fight or flight. So the message goes to the adrenal glands to release adrenaline and cortisol, your primary fight or flight hormones. You probably know that your life is ruled by chemicals, right? Your hormones and your neurotransmitters. These are the chemical messengers that send messages to the systems that they're in charge of, telling those systems what to do, when to do it, and when to stop doing it. Well, if my body is in a state of danger, or my brain is perceiving or trying to make sure I can anticipate or be aware of the danger, my chemicals are going to be out of balance. You can, I'm sure, imagine that to run away from a tiger that's trying to eat me requires a very particular protocol of systems to engage. And that looks very different than if I've been exposed to a virus, right? That's a different protocol of systems to engage so that I can fend off the virus. That also looks very different if there is a food shortage, which could turn into a famine and then I'll die. So that's a different protocol of engagement. So based on the perceived nature of the threat, cortisol instructs all the other chemicals to tell their systems what to do. If I'm running away from an animal, it is all hands on deck. I need to dump a little bit of glucose into my bloodstream so I have fuel to run. I need to elevate my heart rate so that I can circulate. I need to increase the blood pressure so I can circulate the fuel and the oxygen so I can run. Let's say I've also been exposed to a virus at around the same time. Well, I don't need my immune system right now. That's not important. This tiger is the more imminent threat, not this virus. So immune system, you guys just kind of shut down for a moment, work at a very subpar level because it's all a hands on deck to run. I run, I don't get eaten. This is great. We understand that the threat is gone. All the systems that were ramped up, they can come down. All the systems that were shut down, they can come back up. And my body and brain can go about operating like it should. Well, if you fast forward to modern life, unless you've gone through the really, really, really hard work of retraining your brain, of overriding your natural ingrained response of fight or flight when it really isn't a threat to your life, you could be kicking into fight or flight over and over and over and over and over throughout the day, day after week, after month, after year, after who knows how long, which means we're in a state of chronic chemical imbalance, which means the systems that those chemicals are in charge of, there's no way they can be operating properly. Because if my chemicals are out of balance, either they're being overproduced, they're being underproduced, they're being released and sending messages when they really don't need to, or they're not being released and sending their messages when they absolutely need to, my systems can't function, which is why we see the whole host of physical, mental, and emotional health issues arise out of chronic stress. I fully believe, as do many medical professionals, that many of our physical, mental, and emotional health issues are either rooted in chronic stress, or if we have an underlying issue, it is made worse by chronic stress. Because if the chemicals that are in charge of ruling your life are not functioning properly, your human cannot function properly. There's just no way. All that is to say, we have to catch up. Right? We have to catch our brains up to modern life. I don't have to be on high alert for danger every single minute anymore. I'm probably not actually running away from an animal that's trying to eat me. Most of the things that trigger us into the fight or flight response are not threats to our lives, which means not only is there no need for survival to kick in, but once it does, it's going to alter how you think, how you feel, and how you act, which most likely isn't going to be helpful. Now, sometimes, and certainly in some of the roles that you play, fight or flight is amazing, right? It's don't think, just do. That is what fight or flight is for. That is the use in case of emergency. You're in danger, or maybe somebody that you're caring for is in danger. Don't think, just do, act. That is what we need it for. But to be triggering into fight or flight when it isn't necessary is really going to set us up for a whole bunch of issues down the road. So curious if that, I'm sure that, and I hope it makes sense, but is that, do I have it right for you medical professionals who work in this kind of environment and you think about stress and what the stress response in our body is? Just give me a little feedback here if I explained it in a way that kind of makes sense and maybe makes you see it in a different way as well. And again, it's not to say that this is easy. It's very easy to say, don't trigger into fight or flight if it's not a threat to your life. No, it's very hard. Absolutely. Because you literally need to rewire your brain. Fight or flight is ingrained in our DNA. It's programmed in. You have to override the program. And that means we have to teach ourselves to do that. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of awareness for sure. And then a lot of practice. All right, thank you. I had somebody that agrees, so that's good to know. All right, so stress in the workplace, right? How do we do it? What do we think about it? How do we manage it? When I say manage stress, it's don't kick into fight or flight if it's not necessary. Do not allow the release of cortisol if you don't need to. Cortisol is great. As I'm sure you know, it's critical. We should have a burst of it in the morning, and then it should gradually decline as we go through our day. So it's at the lowest level before we go to bed. But cortisol is involved in lots of things, and we need cortisol to be functioning properly. We just don't want to be releasing it when it's not necessary. So that's your goal, is to not allow a release of cortisol if it's not necessary. So thinking about your emotions, right? What are the situations that you deal with, whether it's in your practice or it's, if you have an office or you're working remotely, any of your stressors, whether it is stress in the workplace or stress somewhere else, again, you're the same human. So if we're stressed in the workplace, of course, that's going to spill into our personal life. It's going to spill into our home life. If we have stress at home, that's going to spill into the workplace. So be thinking about these in several aspects of your life, and identify what are the ones that are resonating with you. I think it's so important to acknowledge our emotions. I have a bunch of strong friends, and I'm the strong girl too. I'm the one that everyone comes to. We're still human. Hey, big secret. Yeah, we're still human. We have emotions, right? We get sad, we get lonely, we get angry, we get frustrated. Even though we're positive, these are real emotions that we, first of all, need to acknowledge, and B, help other people understand that we all feel these things. It's what we do with the emotions that's going to impact the outcome in the long run. So I never want people to pretend they're fine when they're not. I absolutely believe if you do not own your emotions in the moment, they are going to own you and probably own a big piece of your life at some other point. So put a label on it. What are you feeling? I'm angry, I'm worried, I'm frustrated, I'm irritated. Let's label it. Sometimes those emotions are helpful. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're necessary. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes to a certain degree, they are helpful and necessary. And then they no longer are that. And then now they become harmful. So we want to really kind of go through that process of emotion processing to work through it, right? Because if you just dismiss it or pretend you're fine, it is going to show up. Your body always knows. It knows when you're lying to it. What about the cognitive reactions? Are we replaying things? Are we having, the events of the day that really consume us post-day? These are things that, of course, if your mind is full of the past or your mind is full of the future, there is no capacity for the present. So we want to have the identification and the awareness of what's going on, and then teach ourselves how to redirect the thought, how to learn to let go of these things, how to work through some of this so that the long-term version of yourself is going to be able to benefit from that. Of course, the physical reactions, and it could be anything. It could be the shallow breathing. It could be the clenched jaw, the clenched shoulders. It could be digestive issues. It could be the elevated heart rate. It could be sweating. It could be, I can't really think or focus. It could be anything. So I look at these things here as your body's warning signs. And then, of course, the interpersonal reactions, right? Nothing happens in its bubble. If I am stressed, it's going to affect everything I do and then other people around me as well. So we want to get to the root of why. So these are your warning signs. Your body and your brain are trying to tell you there are some things that are off. It would prefer if you got to the root of it and corrected it versus ignored it or dismissed it or shrugged it off or took a pill for it or ate some cake because of it or whatever, right? We put lots of band-aids and distractions on these things. So hopefully we're going to really start to unpack and get to the core of what's going on so that we can correct course. All right. So when you are aware that things are on the upswing, okay, again, it's identify these moments. So these are your triggers. This is just a fancy sentence for your triggers. What is your trigger? A trigger is any person, place, situation, or scenario that kicks you into fight or flight. And how you know you're in fight or flight is it's an emotion or a reaction that's tied to fight or flight. So those would be anger, irritation, frustration, worry, fear, woulda, coulda, shoulda, what if, guilt, resentment. All of those back in the day, to some degree, in some way, protected us. So they're all totally normal. I don't want anyone to think like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me because whatever. No, actually, you're just normal. You're human. That's great. I hope we're all striving to be that. But then the next step is this really a threat to my life? My guess is more often than not, the answer is no. Which means, okay, now I need to teach myself to respond differently to this trigger, to this person, place, situation, or scenario. Always remembering you are in control of one person and one person only. That's the one that looks back at you in the mirror. You control what you think, feel, say, and do. You have zero control over what anyone else thinks or feels or says or does. You have no control over outcomes. And I know this is a hard one, especially for the caretakers, for the people whose job it is to save people, right? I know you think your job is to save people. Your job is to do the very best you can with the situation you are faced with your capabilities, your knowledge, your talents, your skills, to have the best outcome possible for that person. That's actually your job. Nobody is a miracle worker, right? You can only do the best you can with what you've got. So if every day and if every situation you show up at your best, physically, mentally, and emotionally, with your skills, your talents, your strengths, your knowledge, that's what you do. That's your job. The outcome is going to be the outcome. And I know that's a very difficult thing to separate from. But learning to separate your role from somebody else's outcome is going to be pretty critical for your own mental and physical well-being and to avoid burnout, for your own longevity in your career, if this is what you want to do. So we have to go through some of the steps, like really put things in perspective. Can I do anything about this? That's always a good question to ask. Is there something I can do about this? If the answer is yes, well, great, let's do it. If the answer is yes, but I'm not willing to, let's answer that honestly. And then say, but I'm not willing to, and then move on and let it go. If the answer is no, then you have to accept that and move on and let it go. So we want to walk through some of these scenarios as you're going through the particular triggers that you're faced with each day. Also identify for yourself, how is my body? How do I know it's a trigger? What physically, mentally, or emotionally am I experiencing? Can you see that in other people, right? Can you identify, okay, there's something going on here? Doesn't mean that y'all experience things the same, but when you understand the signs of fight or flight, you can probably say, oh, there's something going on there. When somebody is really like snippy with me, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I would have thought, what a blah, blah, blah. I would have probably filled in the blank with a not very nice word. Now I say, I wonder what's going on with that person. Because I know, especially if that's not a typical behavior, people do that because of a reason. I'm not excusing the behavior, but I know that there must be something going on. So it is always looking and having a little bit of that understanding of human, human nature and what we do that maybe is then going to help a situation moving forward. Because if my other attitude is, oh, that person is such a blah, 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 well, then I'm going to start to treat that person in a different kind of way. Whereas the fact, if I can have perspective and think, I wonder what's going on, then I'm going to maybe approach it, in a kind and compassionate way. I might even ask, hey, you don't seem quite yourself. What's going on? Depends on how well I know this person and what kind of relationship we have. Think about also what else is going on around you in terms of maybe other people, other teams, ancillary situations going on around you. I think awareness is so critical, and then the processing of what is going on around us to help us figure out, okay, what do I do going forward with that? But absolutely, we have to be tuned in. And I think sometimes we get so busy. Again, maybe we're in the past, maybe we're in the future. I don't even hear or recognize my own warning signs because I'm too busy with everything else. So we have to take that pause. And I think the very easiest thing to do, and this would be no matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing, in the face of any trigger, once you recognize you've been triggered, let's just take a deep breath. I know it sounds very simple, and that's the beauty of it. My guess is some of you have said to somebody at one point, hey, take a deep breath. Maybe somebody has said that to you because it actually works. Holding your breath is a natural reaction to the fight or flight response. It's part of it. Back in the day, if I recognized there was a noise in the bush and I thought, this is a tiger, I'm going to run. Right? Holding my breath prevented me from sitting there thinking about, I wonder what I should do. Because if I stood there to think about it and it was a tiger, I would have been eaten. So holding my breath is natural reaction to a stressor. What it does is it shuts down my ability to think, which is great when it's a real threat and I don't want to think, I just want to run. It's not really great when I'm trying to problem solve, or when I have somebody coming to me and I need to give them a thoughtful response or an answer, or I have a situation and I have to think about, what do I do in this situation? Not having oxygen to your brain is not helpful. So let's take a deep breath, or 5 or a minute or whatever, so that we can get out of that fight or flight response. And then we can start to have some clarity and decide what we do going forward. So that is also very helpful to just help you evaluate what else is going on in you so that we can determine what to do with that going forward. All right, I promised you I was going to be quiet at some point, and so here it is. This is your time, okay? This is your time to kind of get some thoughts out of your head, list the problem situation. So these would be your triggers, and I want you to get as specific and detailed as possible. So not just work, right? Not just, let's say, the chaotic practice, but specifically paint the scenario. And then what is your reaction to it? Because the more specific and detailed you can get with it, the easier it's going to be able to answer, is this a threat to my life? And then if it's not, we're going to be able to figure out, okay, what kind of tool or skill or strategy do I need to do with this thing so that I don't trigger? Because not every trigger is going to be fixed with the same tool or skill or strategy. Maybe 2 different people have the same trigger. One person likes to use this tool and somebody else likes to use this tool. So this is a very tailored plan, which is why I'm going to give you some time. I don't know, maybe at 5 minutes. Let me give 5 minutes. And then if somebody, give me some thumbs up or share with me in the chat box some of these things that you have, because then we can start to walk through what the solutions to it are going to be. I would imagine on-site would be where you're actually maybe with a patient. So I think part of this depends on your specific role. So if you're maybe with a patient versus doing like the paperwork, office work stuff of the practice. So not all of this might apply to every one of you. So yeah, pick the ones that are appropriate for you. All right, hopefully you are working on getting some thoughts out. Thank you for sharing. I had Brenda shared something here. If anyone else has one you want to share, feel free, because we're going to walk through some of them. Hopefully, as you're writing these down, you are recognizing that these are not threats to your life, most likely. Now, I will say, if somebody has one that is, we need to do something about that. And that is, where your EAP can certainly step in, at least be a first point of contact. But it is something that is a real situation for some people. So that is a deeper level of involvement than what we have in this particular training. But I think it's also important for us to identify specifically what is going on in all our unique situations. Thank you. Being micromanaged by peers. I can see how that could be an irritant. Taking care of aging parents and continued education. That's a lot on a plate for sure. Slow drivers, bad drivers. Yep. In the office, when you feel you need support, but don't feel supported. And then I think Brenda's was being newer to management and is frustrating to find all the answers, doesn't have all the answers, and it's frustrating looking for them in the system. These are, I mean, it's totally normal to be irritated, frustrated, worried, overwhelmed by all of these examples people have shared. And yet I will tell you, not a single one of these is a threat to your life. Now, I know someone's saying like, well, a bad driver could be, but so is, eating chicken. I mean, eating chicken could be a threat to your life. It has salmonella and you get sick, you could die, right? So anything could be a threat to your life theoretically, but in that moment, it's probably not. So if I am in control of me and me only, and my goal, again, remember, your goal is to not allow fight or flight to kick in if it's not necessary, then what can I do to not get irritated, angry, frustrated, worried in these situations? Right? A lot of it is just going to be up in here. I have to reframe the situation. I have to have a positive mantra. I have to distract myself from it. I have to be able to redirect my thoughts, take the deep breath. That would be a really good start. If let's take the example of needing support and feel unsupported. So, and I'm not saying you haven't done this, I'm just going to walk through it. What have I done to let people know I need support? Have I articulated what support means to me? Maybe people think you are being supported because that's how they give and show support. But if that's not how you receive support, then it's not going to be recognized. So sometimes it's just a matter of miscommunication, or maybe just no communication. We didn't have communication. Maybe your definition of support is different what somebody else's is. To think that we're going to have all the answers when we're new in a job. Okay, hopefully we understand that that's not it. I actually have a very good friend and similar, brand new in a job. She'd been there less than 2 weeks and she's all beating herself up because she doesn't know everything. Like, I'm sorry. What makes you think you would know everything? Well, I just should. But why? I don't understand. Explain this. Because I should. Oh, because you're perfect. And we joke about this all the time, right? Because she has this type A overachieving, I'm perfect, perfectionist, not I'm perfect, but perfectionist attitude. And she should know everything. It's not realistic at all. And I said, well, what does your boss think? Oh, she just thinks I'm the best. She is so amazed at how much I've learned in such a short period of time. Oh, okay. So sometimes it is very unrealistic expectations we put on ourselves. Maybe it's unrealistic expectations somebody else is putting on us because that is their capacity and capability. And so they just assume that everybody should have this capacity and capability. So some of this does require us to have these conversations, which aren't fun. They can be a little awkward and sometimes scary, and yet hard now or harder later. That's the way it goes, right? Grieving the loss of a mother, absolutely. That can be very emotionally draining and consuming. And I'm happy to hear that you are grieving, because a lot of people just don't grieve. They dismiss it. In fact, I have a very good friend of mine who lost her dad in October, and I check in and I'm like, how are you doing? I'm fine. Really? Because you shouldn't be. You lost your dad. You shouldn't be fine. You should be sad. You should be upset. You should be kind of worried about your mom. Like, those would be normal. It's not normal to be fine if you've lost somebody you love. But her MO is to just pretend that she's fine so that she doesn't have to be sad. And she said that to me. She's like, well, I just keep busy so I don't have to be sad. But you have to be sad. That's part of the process. It's gonna creep up in her life at some point. So I'm sorry that you lost your mother, but I'm happy to hear that you're grieving, because it's necessary and it's not fun. And yet it is that thing that most of us are going to go through, right? We're all going to probably lose somebody at some point. That's the yucky part of life. So go through that process and give yourself the time and the grace to do it. And then, recognize when when we can start to look at positive things, even in the midst of a loss or in the midst of something yucky, because eventually that is what we're going to want to do. Thank you, Misty, for validating what I just shared there, attesting to not dealing with a very big issue that will rear its ugly head in your adult life. Yeah. It almost always will. Whenever I do coaching or counseling and somebody's got an issue, I go all Dr. Phil, right? Well, tell me about your childhood. And it's not always childhood. Sometimes it's young adulthood. It might've been last week, but it's some version of trauma, right? We all experience trauma. That's a big word, but trauma simply means it had a major impact on my brain, on my mental and emotional status. I might not even have known at the time that it was happening. I might not have known at the time that this is trauma. So a lot of it does require to kind of go back in time and root up some of the stuff we don't want to root up. We'd rather just not talk about it, except that you have to. So yeah. Okay, active management on the downswing. So again, think about how you do this to get into your routine. What kind of steps and skills and tools and support network and support system can you do, structures and routines that you can put in place that are to help your human. Again, let's separate your named self from the human you're in charge of. And let me just outline what a human needs in order to thrive. It should be on a day-night schedule, getting up when the sun wakes us up and going down when it's dark. Okay, day-night schedule. During the day, it should be moving its body pretty much all day long, doing lots of physical activity. It should be eating high quality fuel pretty consistently and plenty of it throughout the day, most of it early and often, much, much, much less of it as it gets closer to the sun going down. It should be consuming plenty of water, plenty of hydration, very minimal poison. It doesn't like poison. So even the poison that tastes delicious, there really shouldn't be very much of that. It should have a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of support, a feeling of value, of contribution, of accomplishment. It also should just have things that are for joy and curiosity. They're interesting. They make you want to explore, learn more, be creative. It should get roughly 7 to 9 hours of rest, repair, and recovery time. We can call that sleep. And it should have minimal fight or flight experiences. If you were going to raise a human and you wanted it to be the healthiest, happiest, highest thriving human, that's how you do it. So how do you create your situation in the real life that you live to give your human what it needs to the best of your ability to be its healthiest, happiest, thrivingest, that's a word, highest version of itself? Usually it means hard choices, but Michelle, it's hard. That's right. Yes, it is. So we do the best we can with what we've got, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it can't be done. And I guarantee you it is hard now or harder later. That was my own life experience. That is generally the experience of every single person I've ever worked with. So if we get dedicated to making harder choices now, we'll probably either avoid harder later altogether. The very least, we'll have a much nicer time on the journey getting to later. You got to give this thing what it needs and minimize the damage. And so often in our modern life, all the other things are easier, more convenient, more tasty, more interesting. I don't have time. I must do this. I have to do that. If it's at the expense of your physical, mental, and emotional well-being, that's your choice. I'm here to tell you that you are as important in your own life as anybody else is in your life. And I've come to realize and find out that a lot of people don't actually believe that. They think someone else is more important than them. And I remind them, but if you're not here, or if you're laid out taking a medical leave of absence because you physically cannot get out of bed because your body's like, hey, we're done. gave you enough warning signs, you chose to ignore them, so last chance. Well, then how are you helping anyone else? You are the most important person in your life. That also means you have to do the work. So we got to find ways to structure ourselves. And that could be, lots of different things, whether it's boundaries, it's learning to say no, maybe saying no to yourself on some things, maybe saying no to others. Maybe it's going through the hard process of forgiveness of yourself, of someone else, learning to let go, learning to redirect your thought, retrain your brain, getting yourself in that nice routine of regular exercise, eating healthy food, minimizing the poison, right? I mean, there's so many facets to all of it. And again, everybody's particular plan is going to look different because it depends on what you're doing. Of course, if there are some significant things going on, and I would say anybody who is at a 7 or above, when I started this, I asked you to give yourself a scale, 1 to 10. 10 is I am burned out. 1 is meh, I'm good. I don't even know what that means. If you're at a 7 or above, you're going to want to take this pretty seriously. You really are, because it's going to not be long before you're going to have some pretty significant consequences that are going to be really hard to deal with. So do the hard work now, whether that is, seeking professional help, counseling, guided intuitive coach, a spiritual healer, your minister, whatever. We have to get thoughts out of our heads. We have to have people who understand these things to help us guide us through some of the stuff we don't know. I think it's also important to be tuned in and recognize what's going on in others so that we can identify and maybe help them get on a path towards, getting to a better place. And then I love the fill up approach. Focus on what's important. Look and listen for what others are experiencing. Understand personally what your experiences mean. This is all called self-awareness and personal growth and development. That takes time and effort. But I promise when you decide to do that, it will make everything else a lot easier in your life. It really will. I know in my own journey, when I started to figure myself out, because I got to the point where I could see what my future self was going to be like, and it wasn't really great. And I was like, okay, well, you can continue doing what you're doing, and that's going to be your life, or you can start to figure some stuff out and make some hard choices and continue to learn and grow. And then when you have an experience that wasn't great, you can either be mad about it forever and ever and ever, or you can be mad about it because you should. And then you can decide that, maybe there's a lesson here. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to grow and learn. Maybe there is something that I have now put in my toolkit that I can help with someone else later on. So much of it is just about the choices that we make and what we choose to do with the experiences that life has put in our path. And that's hard work. And sometimes we want to do it, and very often we don't, because it's hard and it's yucky. And yet, this is life. One of my mottos I painted it and it hangs on a canvas in my wall right there. It's from an old Indigo Girls song. It's only life after all. Life is a series of challenges. It's what we do in the face of those challenges and how we choose to grow through life or choose to not. That's going to dictate really the quality of our life and the joy and what we do and give and what we have to appreciate and where we end up when we're at our final days. Are we living a life of regret, or are we living a life of, yeah, that was a life and I'm good. So there it is. This is now your homework. What are your action steps, right? This is where eventually you're going to have to set some time aside to iron out your plan and be pretty dedicated to working through the plan, because you can't just write a plan. You actually have to do the work and do it with kindness and compassion for yourself in the process. Do it with some patience, but you got to do it. And I promise you, you'll have a good impact in the long run. Lots of great resources. These interactive toolkits are really good for helping with enhancing mindfulness, teaching your resiliency skills, maybe getting a little better sleep if that is something that you're struggling with. And then of course your EAP. So if you haven't already explored all the benefits that you and your eligible family members have, please take a little time to go through that. It's not just the professional counseling services, but resource referrals, consultations, all kinds of things. This is a great kind of first step for a lot of stuff. And if nothing else, they can guide you where to go. Very easy to get in touch, 888-881-LINC, or online, supportlink.com, username PSH. I've gotten a couple questions if I'll be sharing the slides. I don't know. I just teach. That's probably, but that would be a good question for Angela. We did record it, so I know you'll get the recording link, which I think is probably way more valuable than just looking at the slides. But on that recording, you'll see the slides too. So. And that is all I have. So I am going to pass it back.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. And yes, we will reach out to SupportLink and make sure that it's okay to get those slides out. And if so, we will have that in the follow-up email that you all will be getting. So any other final questions or comments for Michelle? That was a great presentation. Thank you so much to everyone who was very interactive. That was very helpful.
Yes, I appreciate all your contributions as well. If anybody would like to stay in touch with me, you can just email me, michelle@betterbeings.net, and I can put you on my mailing list. I send one email a month, just news and tidbits and updates and some healthy tips and things like that. So feel free to reach out. Always like to stay connected when I have a nice interactive group.
Yep, and we will put that email in our follow-up email as well. And the great thing is Michelle will be joining us multiple times throughout the year with other Lunch and Learns. So if you like today's presentation, come on back. We will be advertising those in the months to come. But if there are no final questions or comments, we again thank you so much, Michelle. This was a great presentation. Thank you everyone for joining, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.